The moment my future daughter-in-law's mother leaned into the microphone and said, "Well, we all know Daniel turned out fine despite his upbringing," I felt the entire room go quiet. Not silent the way a room goes quiet when something beautiful happens. Silent the way it goes quiet right before a storm tears the roof off. I was sitting at table 7, the one they'd placed closest to the kitchen door, and I remember thinking how deliberate that felt. Not accidental. Deliberate. The way everything that woman did was deliberate. But let me back up. Because you need to understand what it took to get to that room, to that chair, to that moment before you can understand why what I did next changed everything. My son, Daniel, was born on a Tuesday in November, the same week his father decided that fatherhood wasn't something he'd signed up for. Daniel was 11 days old when his father left. I remember the exact number, because I had been counting the days the way new mothers count. Everything, feedings, diaper changes, hours of sleep. 11 days. Then it was just the two of us. I was 34 years old, working as a licensed practical nurse at a regional hospital in Ohio, and I had exactly $912 in my checking account. I know that number too. I wrote it down in a little notebook the night my husband left. The way you write down the starting point of a long journey you're not sure you'll survive. I did survive it. More than survived. I worked double shifts when Daniel was old enough for daycare. I worked holidays, overnight shifts, weekends. I packed his lunch every single morning for 13 years. Never once bought school lunch. Not because I was cheap, but because I wanted him to open that box and know somebody had thought about him that morning before the sun came up. I went to every school play, every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference, even the ones where his teachers said things that made me want to cry in the parking lot afterward. I cried in the parking lot, then I dried my eyes and drove home and made dinner. Daniel grew up knowing that I was his whole world and that he was mine. He grew up knowing that love, real love, doesn't leave. It shows up. It packs the lunch. It sits in the parking lot and cries and then drives home anyway. He was 28 when he called me to tell me about Vanessa. "Mom," he said, and I could hear something in his voice I hadn't heard before. Something lit up. I think she's it. I met her 3 weeks later at a little Italian restaurant downtown. She was warm and funny and she looked at my son the way I'd always hoped someone would look at him. I liked her immediately. I told her so. What I didn't know yet was her mother. Her mother, I'll call her Margaret, because that's her name, and she's earned every letter of it, was a woman who had spent 40 years building a commercial real estate company from what she described, had every possible opportunity, as nothing but hard work and good breeding. She wore suits that cost more than my monthly mortgage. She spoke in the particular tone of someone who had never once been told no, and interpreted any hesitation as incompetence. The engagement party was her idea. Her house, her guest list, 220 people, most of whom I had never met, crammed into a home that was less a house than a statement: marble floors, a curved staircase, a catering staff in matching uniforms. Daniel had asked me privately if I was comfortable with it. I told him yes. I told him this was Vanessa's family and we would be gracious. I was gracious. Lord, I was gracious. Margaret met me at the door with a handshake, not a hug, and looked at my dress, which I had bought specifically for the occasion, navy blue, tasteful in a way that suggested she was making a note of it. She introduced me to her husband, a quiet man named Gerald who apologized with his eyes every time his wife spoke. She introduced me to cousins, business partners, college friends. Every introduction was the same. And this is Daniel's mother. She's a nurse. Not she raised him alone. Not she's the reason he is who he is. Just, she's a nurse. I smiled. I shook hands. I ate the past appetizers and complimented the flowers and asked thoughtful questions and listened to people talk about vacation homes and investment portfolios. I was so gracious I barely recognized myself. The formal dinner began at 7. I was seated, as I mentioned, at table 7. Daniel was at the head table with Vanessa, her parents, and the wedding party. He caught my eye across the room several times and gave me the small nod that meant, "Are you okay?" And I gave him the one that meant, "I'm fine. Enjoy yourself." The toasts began after the main course. Vanessa's father went first, brief, warm, clearly nervous. One of Vanessa's friends from college told a funny story about the night they met Daniel at a party, and how Vanessa had called her at midnight just to say, "I think I found him." The room laughed. I dabbed my eyes. Then Margaret stood up. She had the kind of presence that commands a room without effort. The conversations died down immediately. She waited for total silence. The way performers do, the way people do when they know they have it and they want you to know they know. Daniel, she began, and her voice was warm, practiced, exactly the right volume. When Vanessa first brought you home, I'll admit I had questions. Any mother does. She smiled. The room smiled with her. But what I saw was a young man of extraordinary character. Self-made. Determined. She paused. We all know Daniel turned out fine despite his upbringing. She said it lightly. The way you say something that's supposed to land as a joke but is designed to be a knife. The room didn't quite know how to respond. A few people chuckled uncertainly. I heard someone near me draw a sharp breath. Single-parent homes are a challenge, she continued, in the same smooth, unruffled tone. No father figure, limited resources. And yet here he is. Another smile. A testament to resilience. If nothing else. I set down my fork. I had been holding it, I remember this clearly, over a piece of roasted asparagus, and I set it down with a small, precise click against the china plate, and I sat completely still for approximately 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, I thought about 11 days. I thought about $912. I thought about 13 years of school lunches and parking lot tears. I thought about every double shift, every missed birthday party I attended anyway after my shift. Every time someone looked at me and saw just a nurse and I smiled and kept moving. I thought about my son's face the day he graduated from college, standing in his cap and gown, scanning the bleachers until he found me, and breaking into the kind of smile that makes all of it worth it. And then I thought about something else, something I hadn't thought about in a very long time. I stood up, not dramatically, not with a great show of pushing back my chair or making noise. I simply stood, the way you stand when you have made a decision, and I said, clearly enough for the tables around me to hear, "May I say something?" The room shifted. Daniel's head turned. I could see Vanessa's hand reach for his arm under the table. Margaret looked at me with an expression I can only describe as calculated patience, the expression of someone who expects to handle whatever comes next. Of course, she said, and gestured to the room as if granting permission. I didn't wait for a microphone. My voice has always carried 26 years of calling across hospital hallways will do that. Margaret, I said, I want to thank you for this beautiful evening. I really do. You've gone to extraordinary lengths. And it shows. She inclined her head. Smiled. Daniel, I said, turning to my son, you are the single greatest thing I have ever done with my life. And I want you to hear me say that clearly, in front of every person in this room, so there is no confusion about it. His jaw was tight. He was watching me carefully, the way he had watched me his whole life, with complete trust that I knew what I was doing even when he couldn't see the whole picture. Now, I said, turning back to Margaret, I want to address what you just said, because I think it deserves a response. This isn't necessary, she began. I raised my son alone, I said. Not despite anything. I raised him because I decided that whatever circumstances we were handed, he would know that he was loved, that he was worth showing up for, and that the people who matter don't leave. I let that settle for just a moment. He learned what a father figure looks like by watching me. He learned how to work by watching me. He learned that dignity has nothing to do with how much marble is on your floor. Someone at the table behind me laughed, not the nervous kind. The kind that means yes. Margaret had gone very still. But that's not actually why I stood up, I said. And here is where I have to go back further. 31 years further, to be exact. When my son's father left, he didn't leave because he didn't love us. He left because he had run out of road. He had borrowed money, a significant amount of money from a business partner, to start a construction company that had promise, real promise, and the business partner had called the loan early, without warning, in a way that was not fully legal but that cost more to fight than we could afford. The business collapsed. He collapsed. And then he left, which I have never fully forgiven, but which I have spent 30 years trying to understand. The business partner's name, at the time, was a woman named Margaret Holloway. She had since married Gerald Ashworth. She had since changed her business structure several times, in ways that conveniently obscured her early ventures. She had built her current company on foundations that did not bear close examination. I had recognized her the moment I saw her photograph on Vanessa's social media page, 6 months before the engagement party. I had gone cold all the way through. The way you go cold when something you thought was buried turns out to be standing in your future daughter-in-law's living room. I had said nothing to Daniel. Not then. I wanted to be certain. I wanted to be fair. I spent 3 months being certain and being fair, and then I spent another 3 months deciding what to do about it. I had decided, in the end, that I would do nothing, that this was my son's happiness, that Vanessa was not her mother, that the past was the past. And then Margaret stood up with a microphone and told 220 people that my son had overcome his upbringing. I know you, I said to her now, quietly, not accusatory, almost gently. I've known who you were since before this engagement was announced. You went by a different name then. Holloway. You had a small commercial lending operation in Franklin County, Ohio, and in 1993, you called in an illegal early repayment demand on a construction loan that destroyed my family. The room had gone completely, entirely silent. Margaret's expression had not changed. That was the most frightening thing, her expression had not changed. But something behind her eyes had. Something that looked, for the first time all evening, like fear. I'm not here to relitigate 1993, I said. I'm not here to make a scene at my son's engagement party. I want Daniel and Vanessa to have a beautiful life together, and I believe they will. I looked at Vanessa directly. She was pale, her hand still on Daniel's arm, her eyes wide. She was not her mother. I could see that clearly. But I will not sit at table 7 and let anyone in this room believe that my son survived something. He didn't survive it. He was built by it. We both were. I picked up my wine glass. To Daniel and Vanessa, I said, may you always show up for each other. That's the whole secret. That's all it ever was. I drank. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Gerald, quiet, apologetic Gerald, began to clap. And the room followed him, the way rooms follow someone who finally does the thing everyone wanted to do. Daniel was across the room before the applause finished. He put his arms around me and he didn't say anything for a long time. And neither did I, because some things don't need to be said out loud by that point. Margaret left the party 20 minutes later. I heard she told the catering staff she had a headache. Gerald stayed. He found me near the end of the evening, standing by the window with a cup of coffee, and he touched my arm briefly and said, I'm sorry. I've wanted to say that to someone for a long time. I nodded. I believed him. I think he had been apologizing for his wife in small, invisible ways for most of his marriage. The harder conversation happened the next morning, when Daniel came to my house alone, and we sat at the kitchen table the way we had sat at that table his entire life. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. Because I didn't want you to have to choose, I said. And I still don't. This is between me and history, not between you and Vanessa. He was quiet for a while. He has always been good at sitting with hard things without rushing to resolve them. I like to think he learned that from me too. Does Vanessa know? He asked. I don't know what Vanessa knows about her mother's business history, I said carefully. That's a conversation for the two of you. He nodded. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. She's not her mother, he said. I know that, I said. I knew that before last night. What unfolded over the following weeks was not simple, and I will not pretend it was. Margaret Ashworth did not apologize. I had not expected her to. What she did instead was contract pull back from the wedding planning, become less present, have more headaches and scheduling conflicts. Vanessa called me twice during that period, both times ostensibly to discuss florists, and then circling, eventually, toward the real reason. She told me she was trying to protect her family, Vanessa said, during the second call. Her voice was careful, measured. She was a woman trying to be fair to two people she loved and finding it difficult, which I respected enormously. She told me she's always made hard business decisions and she can't apologize for who she is. I'm not asking for an apology, I said. I stopped needing one a long time ago. Are you okay with me? With us? Vanessa asked. And I could hear underneath the question how much it cost her to ask it. Sweetheart, I said, and I meant it completely. I could not be happier about you. I have been happy about you since the first time Daniel said your name on the phone, and I heard that light in his voice. You are not responsible for your mother's decisions any more than Daniel was responsible for his father's. She cried a little. I let her. Then we talked about florists for 20 minutes, and it was fine. The wedding was on a Saturday in June, outside, on a property in the countryside that Vanessa had chosen because of the oak trees. Daniel cried when she came down the aisle. I cried from the front row of the groom's side, sitting next to Daniel's college roommate, who handed me a handkerchief without being asked, which I appreciated. Margaret sat on the bride's side, composed and impeccably dressed, and she did not look at me and I did not look at her, and that suited both of us. What I heard later, not from Daniel, who was on his honeymoon, but from Vanessa's cousin, who had apparently done some digging after the engagement party, was that 2 former business associates of Margaret's had filed complaints with the State Commerce Board in the months following. Whether those complaints went anywhere, I don't know. I'm a nurse. I know how to hold on to information, and I know when to let it go. I let it go. What I kept was the memory of my son's face in that room, watching me stand up. Not afraid. Not embarrassed. Watching me the way he has always watched me, with the kind of trust that tells you everything you did was worth it. People ask me sometimes, women my age who have done what I've done, raised a child alone, built something from next to nothing, kept going when the keeping going was the whole job, they ask me if I have any regrets. If I wish it had been different, I tell them honestly. I wish Daniel had had a father who stayed. I wish I had had a partner. I wish there had been someone at table 1 instead of table 7. Someone to lean over and say well done when the night was finished. But I don't wish away the life we built. I don't wish away the lunchboxes or the parking lot tears or the double shifts or the $912 that turned into a mortgage paid off and a son who looks at his wife the way I always hoped someone would look at. To him, I don't wish away who I became in the becoming. At the end of the reception, after the cake and the first dance and the father-daughter dance that Vanessa shared with Gerald while I watched and felt something complicated and true, Daniel found me at the edge of the tent. The lights were strung overhead and the oak trees were dark against the evening sky, and he looked, for a moment, exactly like the 11-day-old I had held in my arms in an apartment that was suddenly too quiet. Thank you, he said. For everything. All of it. Not just tonight. I took his face in my hands the way I used to when he was small. He let me. You turned out fine, I told him. And then, because the moment deserved it, I smiled. Because of your upbringing. He laughed. He hugged me. I let him hold on as long as he wanted. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were bright, and the lights were strung overhead, and somewhere across the lawn, his wife was laughing at something her cousin had said, and the night was warm and full and exactly enough. It was, in the end, everything. And I had built every bit of it myself.